When you hear the name Leonardo, what comes to mind? A smile, a robot knight, or maybe just a mountain range. If you think he's just a painter, or that he's only in museums, think again. Because today we uncover an unknown Leonardo. No masterpieces, no Last Suppers. Just a path to discovery. You might call it the blueprint of genius. Welcome to our channel, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. Let's start at the beginning. Born out of wedlock on April 15th, 1452, near the Tuscan town of Vinci, Leonardo's childhood is unremarkable, except for its order. Peasants farmed, traders traveled, and church bells rang. There was nothing here to make a child different. So instead, he made himself different. Birds, streams, and the curved wing of a dove became his classroom. The countryside became his laboratory. And this, too, was a perfectly normal childhood. Except it wasn't. For at 14, he abandoned that normal life. He apprenticed with Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence, the capital of Renaissance Italy, a city famed for beauty, banking, and big thinkers. It was the perfect place for a prodigy. But now, surrounded by geniuses, Leonardo was thrust into a crucible. Around him, young artists perfected their craft. They copied sculpture, mastered draftsmanship, and competed for commissions. Yet many would never become masters themselves. So what set Leonardo apart? Vasari tells us that Verrocchio stopped painting after the young apprentice outshone him. Whether myth or truth, the moment marks a new star. And that's when he started working on the Grand Cavallo, a colossal equestrian statue of Francis I. It was the biggest project in Milan, a chance for a new artist to win renown. In fact, it was bigger than anyone had attempted. Since antiquity, the bronze alone required 24 tons and decades to acquire. When Leonardo arrived, he found a workshop humming with activity. In addition to the hundreds of workers assembling the armature, there were master assistants, each specialized in one part of the process: painters, chemists, architects, and sculptors. A master like Verrocchio oversaw everything, but Leonardo was eager to try his own hand at it. He learned to look at the world mathematically and to make the invisible visible. Now, armed with a scientific mindset, he spent 4 years on horseback, observing, dissecting, and reassembling them in every position, even holding his arm and ribs up to the horse to ensure accuracy. Then he took on the clay himself, molding it while keeping the proportions true. But making a perfect horse was only half the task. Leonardo's rider demanded equal attention, and this was a challenge of a whole other order. The head, the face, the glance, all held secrets, the way a closed fist hides cards. Over the course of his career, he produced dozens of self-portraits, but none more revealing than this one. At first it looks like any other, but in this case, don't trust your eyes. He's not actually holding a dagger to his throat. Instead, he's demonstrating sfumato, the smoky technique he pioneered, which uses shadows and color to blur outlines, capturing the hazy edges of reality. In 1486, after 8 years in Milan, war interrupted his progress. The French invaded and conquered. It was devastating. Every horse was requisitioned for cannons. And so the sculptor's worst nightmare came true. The horses were melted down, including the Grand Cavallo. Its destruction was also Leonardo's defeat, but his response will shock you. While his rivals lamented losses and moved on to smaller projects, he took his notebooks outdoors and began to dissect birds, mapping the exact curve of wings, beaks, and claws. He designed an aerial screw and tested it in wind tunnels. He sketched diving bells and submarines. Overnight, he'd gone from court artist to court jester, from respected engineer to unemployed inventor. Yet in the rubble of that failure lay the seeds for inventions no one could yet build. After 16 years in northern Italy, he returned south. He had a house built in Tuscany, and he filled it with books, maps, and mechanical contraptions. This was his closest approximation of family, a home built around his genius. Within a year, he accepted an invitation from the monks of Santa Maria del Grazie. He would design and paint the Last Supper, a feast that has captivated viewers for 5 centuries. We know the scene well, but if you look closely, notice the subtle shift in focus. His hands are already trembling when he sets brush to wall. Just below them, the apostles crowd forward, but whose face do you find yourself locked onto? As always, Leonardo's gaze cuts through artifice to reveal a profound truth. He noticed that too, in 1510, as he repainted the background. He probably knew that the mural was doomed. Fresco was faster than oil, but it was also unforgiving. Oil gave the artist more control, but the surface was vulnerable. The paint began falling within his lifetime. The masterpiece suffered. Yet time cannot touch the spirit of the work. That's why centuries later, scientists stand before the Last Supper, analyzing Halus and cracking the code of his. For Leonardo chose science over certainty. He valued observation and control so much, he risked permanence. These are only 2 pages from a collection of some 13,000. The Leonardo notebooks, bound in leather and filled with tens of thousands of pages, they constitute the largest body of scientific writing in the early modern era. Many contain mirror writing, which scholars believe was meant to protect ideas, or simply prevent smudges. But they all bear witness to a meticulous mind, relentlessly observing, testing and questioning. It's staggering in scale, scope, and ambition. Today, we flip through facsimiles because the originals are too fragile to display. But these pale copies cannot capture the alchemy of the originals, the texture of aged paper, the feel of dried ink. Nor can they convey how Leonardo used the notebook as an interface between idea and execution, or how his pages anticipate modern theories by centuries. Take, for example, his studies of birds in flight, which literally mapped the path to powered flight. His diagrams of a bird's wing inspire today's computer-powered airplanes, yet he never saw an airplane himself. When studying anatomy, he'd ask butchers for offal and use animal fats to sculpt muscles, tendons, and veins. With a knife and a bit of clay, he was able to accurately depict heart valves in motion. And today's surgeons use his anatomical sketches to teach dissections. Was he an inventor? A scientist? A visionary? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. His notebooks are the mind's atlas. Tens of thousands of pages, drawings, grocery lists, jokes, and precise studies of heart valves and riveted gears. Over the course of his life, he designed the world's first armored car, a robotic knight, and a machine gun. We don't usually think of Leonardo as a military man, but as a teenager, he was fascinated by the latest weapons, and unlike his contemporaries, he didn't just want to win wars. He wanted to end them, and to do that, he needed to know the enemy, so he began to draw them. But he wasn't interested in faces or uniforms. He wanted to understand their weapons and how they moved. He studied men fighting with swords, spears, and firearms, sketching each move with astonishing precision. And that same desire to understand led him to create the world's first armored car. It was a vehicle designed to withstand incoming cannon fire and shoot back. It was a feat of engineering ingenuity, but it was never built. The notebook pages are all we have to prove it ever existed. Or consider his ornithopter, a machine meant to fly without flapping wings. It was based on the wings of a beetle, a swimming stroke, or a bird taking off. But his design didn't just imitate nature, it pushed past it. He tried to improve on the natural world, and that's how we measured genius. Leonardo didn't succeed all the time, but his failures were far from meaningless. He realized that his perfect model of the eye was impossible to paint on a flat surface. So he invented sfumato, and when his equestrian